Good afternoon, everybody. We have a great guest joining us today. We have Steve Fezzik from pregame.com. Steve is widely believed to be one of the best bettors, sports bettors in the entire world. In the early 2000s, Fezzik won 6 major sports betting tournaments. He later won the Las Vegas Hilton Super Contest in back-to-back seasons in 2008 and 2009, besting a field of over 300 people each time. This contest is widely regarded as the World Series of sports betting, and Steve is the only 2-time winner. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you for the very kind introduction. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here this morning.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It's we're a group of traders here, and so I think the overlap. There's a lot of people that are very interested in sports, and so it's great to have you to talk sports and get our minds off the markets for a few minutes.
Yes, and I kind of wish that I had been gotten into your business actually, but what I do is not all that dissimilar with what all of you do.
Well, on that point, I guess if you can elaborate, take me through how you see sports betting and how that overlaps with the trading mentality.
Right. So I'm basically doing a valuation on every sports team and every sports game, producing a suggested price, if you will, on what I think that game should be trading at. And then I look at the price that the market's put up with a point spread, with a side, with a total. And when the number that's being dealt differs enough from what I believe the correct number is, I'll go ahead and enter in an investment and lay typically $1.10, risk $110 to win $100.
And so how do you look for an edge, whether it be, in what you're doing? Like what sort of points do you look at?
There's a lot of different ways to get at this, but your starting point, I firmly believe, should be power ratings with all the teams. You should know approximately how good each and every team is. And I do a numeric number, a little bit unique from other people, but I basically say a 0 team is an average team. So if you have a power rating of a 0, that would put you right in the middle. As an example, in the NFL right now, a team that's right almost dead average would be like the Tennessee Titans. And so that'd be a starting point. Then I take the difference between the 2 power ratings of the teams on a neutral site, and that would be my first draft point spread on the game. And then I'll look for situational edges, motivational edges, travel edges, scheduling edges, other aspects of the game which could make the differential between the points, the pure power rating spread not be correct because of motivation, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, in the markets right now, especially over the last 10 years, computers have become more and more prevalent where there are algorithms literally trying to capitalize on anything. And once it starts working, more algorithms jump on top of it. And, technology and trend followers and different technology has really changed our market. What have you seen from, the sports betting side? Is that similar?
Very much so. So it used to be that there was so much public money in the NFL and some other sports that you literally could almost blindly play things like home underdogs in the NFL. If you bet every one of them, you were going to win about 53%. So you could blindly play those and turn a profit. And what's happened is the math geeks and the algorithm guys have taken over, and they brought these numbers down to where in aggregate, they're pretty darn accurate across the board. Where they missed their mark, in my opinion, is it's too much math now, and there's no artistry, and there's no actually guys. The algorithm guys aren't watching the games enough to recognize when the stats will lie to you. Example, the New England Patriots have covered over 55% of their games since they won their first Super Bowl. How is that possible? An ultra-public team like the Patriots, there should be a point spread tax. They should be covering less than 50%, not 55% plus. But the reason that they cover is because their stats, their underlying stats are never very good for a championship team, but where they excel is in game theory and management. Example, in any important game, Belichick will kick off to the 2-yard line. He won't kick the ball out of the end zone. That strategy alone single-handedly won them the game, in my opinion, in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons, not any other factor.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so, I always find it amazing when watching sports how the line, whether it be a college football game, pro football game, the line is always so accurate. How do they go about making the line so accurate in your opinion?
They let the bettors set the line. And, one thing is that the accuracy of the line, I would say it's really good in terms of getting two-way action and ultimately predicting 50-50 how much a team covers by. But anyone who watched the NBA playoffs knows a lot of these lines weren't accurate at all because teams were covering by 25 points back and forth. So the reason that the ultimate line is so accurate is I think the odds makers oftentimes don't do a very good job setting the opening number. But if there's ever a mistake, the bettors against those virgin lines that are first set up they're ready to fire, and they'll go ahead and move the line dramatically to get it to where it should be. And we've seen that over the summer with a lot of NFL teams were not valued correctly back in April. Now it's August, and those valuations are getting much more accurate now.
That's interesting. So I know that you have a website which you kind of go over live betting and different ways to beat live betting. You have a CD set. It's how to beat live betting amongst other topics that you touch on, and that's lifetimesportswinner.com. So that's lifetimesportswinner.com. Can you tell me about live betting and what you're doing on that website?
Yeah, so it's a site where, and by the way, we're relaunching the site today, so the timing is excellent. 8 years ago, I did a seminar live with a bunch of people that talked about, hey, how do pros actually do this? How do they win betting on sports? It was greatly received. We did a bunch of CDs. It had gotten a little bit out of date, and so we just retaped all of it this past summer, so it's ready to go. And we are just updating that website today. So if you go to lifetimesportswinner.com, it'll be updating, I think, later today, and we'll have brand new CDs that talk about just exactly how a pro sports bettor looks to make money. And it's not so much necessarily playing sides and totals, but a whole lot of derivative betting, proposition betting. Example, there's a PGA golf tournament that just started, and we'll talk about how rain really softened up the course, so the pros absolutely pounded the cut line to go under 143.5, the lowest score to be under 63.5. Literally, we saw enormous line moves just because of the weather conditions in St. Louis this past week.
Oh, that's interesting. So is that a trend in the market, would you say, right now? Live betting, being able to bet like through the game, whether it be golf or football or baseball, anything?
Absolutely. The number one aspect of sports betting that is just exploding, and with the legalization throughout the U.S. that's coming, this is going to become just bigger and bigger, that betting on games during timeouts, think about it. You basically have one option to bet the side or the total historically. And now with each and every timeout in a football game, in any major game, all the books are putting up new sides, new totals. And it's a lot harder for them to get that right. And because of that, it's a much better opportunity to wager. I almost equate this to the poker players out there, to betting before the flop versus betting after the flop. Post-flop play is so much more difficult in poker, same thing in sports betting, and so much more profitable.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like you said, there's in the old days, a few years ago, it was just one bet before the game or over under, and now throughout the game you can join in whenever you want. And you touched on a topic I definitely want to elaborate on is more recently the legalization or the path towards legalization of sports betting in different areas. How do you see that affecting your business and legalized gambling?
Right. Well, I've got two aspects of my business. So I provide information and my actual picks and selections. And this will open the door up to a lot of the country. There's that dentist in Mississippi that maybe liked to bet on sports, but it was nebulous as far as the legality of it. Now that it is fully legal in his state, all of a sudden, maybe he decides, okay, I'm going to start wagering, and I want to go ahead and get some information from some experts, including myself. And so it'll open up those doors for me. And just as a professional gambler, I love the fact that there's more money in the pool, public money. Public money helps to skew lines. Typically in many sports, it's the pros fighting the pros in terms of betting and sharpening up the lines. But in the NFL, in a Monday Night Football game, it's not unusual that the pros think a line should be 8, and it will go up to 10 only because the public is all going to bet the favorite, giving us opportunity as a pro to play back against the public and take the underdog.
Yeah, that makes sense. You might not know this, but what's your opinion on the sports? It seems like over the past 100 years, sports betting is broadly been not done at the casinos. It's been done with bookies and things like that, and so it's always been kind of like a shady underworld. Now with this legalization, it seems like it's going to be much more accessible to everybody. What percentage do you think that there'll be a large influx of capital into sports betting?
Oh, very much so, and you're seeing it already with the ESPNs, the sports leagues that have always historically shunned talk of sports betting, now looking to get actively involved, making sure that the integrity of all the information is accurate. For the first time, you're seeing that become widespread, and even you turn on ESPN and they'll have the episode on SportsCenter, the bad beats of the night and the like. So it has become very much widespread talk of it, as opposed to wink, wink, nod, nod, someone alluding to the fact that, I guess this game is pretty much over now.
Right. And, I know Adam Silver from the NBA has been very forthcoming. He's actually very interested in kind of tackling this and seeing it as a way to really expand his business.
Yes, one thing that they're going to have to get their hands on with the live wagering is they've discussed wagering like, will the next free throw be made, yes or no, and the like. And this is very tricky because when you watch a sporting event on TV, you're literally 14 seconds behind when you're watching it in high definition. And because of that, that free throw has already been made or missed. There really isn't enough time to put those sort of proposition bets up without being exploited by someone who's actually in the arena. So that's going to be a headache that for those books that want to book each and every play to try to handle.
It's a good point. At the arena live, everybody's going to need an iPad so they can participate.
And post the plays. And books are aware that people can do that, and then they'll kick people out that do that. I think actually tennis tournaments were notorious for this sort of thing as well.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. So, back to the NFL. You've been doing this for so long. What's your secret? How do you beat the NFL today?
Well, I think it ultimately comes down to making really good numbers and initially, and then being able to adjust for information that's coming in. And frankly, there's going to be times where there's injuries that come in, and one team has cluster injuries on the O-line, and you got to evaluate, how important is this? How much would you move the number? You look at the Cowboys, who have a great O-line, but their left side of their O-line got crippled last year. One of their key players got a back injury. He was out for 3 games. And that really compromised their ability to run the ball. And then Dak Prescott was not nearly as effective. But being able to make the proper adjustments when you see these injuries, really critical.
So injuries is really one key that you focus on when dissecting the landscape?
That is one aspect that I know many handicappers, that is their key focus. Unfortunately, I'd like to be better at it. I don't know the player personnel as well as some. I'm much more of the math geek that runs all the numbers and takes a look at where I see there being key value early in the week. And I tend to fire more early in the week. The evaluation of the injury information and the like is something that I do, but frankly, I don't think it's something that I'm best at.
Right. Don't you think there's a lot of gaming of the system? Like, I think I remember seeing Tom Brady was on the injured list for, basically every day of his career. But, he comes out and plays every week.
Absolutely. And you got to know there's certain teams, like watching a Bill Belichick press conference is worthless. He's not going to tell you anything that's going to give you any sort of edge. or any sort of information. But one thing I want to mention about Belichick that I'm shocked by is how the other coaches aren't smart enough, and people are going to get really upset with me saying, oh, how can this guy in Vegas know more, thinks he knows more than all these NFL coaches do? Well, I don't. The NFL coaches about the X's and O's and the play calling and the management of the team and the like, obviously they know so much more. But when it comes to game management, making proper play calls, I can tell you I and a whole bunch of other gamblers are way ahead of the average NFL coach. And I'll go back to things as simple as the coin flip. I won't go into great detail. It's generally slightly advantageous to defer when you win the coin toss and you wind up with the ball in the third quarter. Belichick understands this and he defers almost all the time. And yet there's still a lot of coaches out there that take the ball when they win the coin toss. How can that be when all they have to do is watch one New England game? They say, oh, Belichick defers. I don't even know why, but I'll just copy him. And they're not even smart enough to do that.
Yeah, and I think on that topic as well, I think we've started to see some statisticians say that if they go for two every time, opposed to kicking the extra point, there might be a slight edge there as well, but no teams are really embracing that.
Yeah, and the one team that does, Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers, they tend to go to two with no rhyme nor reason. Obviously, if you can make it more than 50% of the time, you should go for two early in the game. Tomlin is a coach that just drives me crazy because he's a great motivator, but he will literally go for two. Obviously, it's worth 2 points or 1 point, so if it's 50-50, you're indifferent. But yet he'll have 4th and goal from the 1 yard line, and he'll often kick the field goal. And in that situation, if you get a touchdown, it's worth 7, but the field goal is not worth 3. It's only worth 2 because it's easily worth a point just to take a knee and give the other team the ball on their own 1 yard line. That's advantageous for you. So it's literally 7 points versus 2 points that we're talking about, and yet he'll still kick the field goal, completely inconsistent with his go for 2 decisions.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, one of the big benefits of having you on at such a great, brilliant NFL mind, we got NFL starting up soon. What are your thoughts? I know that you find a lot of value in the season over-unders. I know that you had one pick for us in terms of the over-under for the season. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and by the way, I am available at pregame.com in the forums, and oftentimes I talk about all these concepts. So if you need to reach me, that's a great place to go at pregame.com, just into the NFL, and you can ask me questions about what I'm doing. And I know we're scrolling that during this seminar. But the Colts are an interesting animal in that they're 4-12 last year. Their underlying stats were lousy. Brissett struggled all year coming in, not having enough playing time. But when Andrew Luck is an elite quarterback, the Colts have won 11 games. And then he was banged up, and they won 8 games back-to-back years with him not being 100%. All signs point to him being close to, if not 100%, but certainly more towards 100% versus the damaged goods Andrew Luck that we've seen prior years. But because they had such a horrible year and their stats are so terrible and their roster's bad, the Colts got opened as a 6-win team. Well, that's been bet up to 6.5, and now it's been up to 7. I still think it's not nearly enough of an adjustment because it's all based upon that 4-12 year with Brissett that I think you can throw in the garbage can. Frankly, if you have a top 8 quarterback in the NFL, bottom line is you win 8 games. The only example I can remember of a top 10 quarterback consistently that wasn't able to win 8 games, the New Orleans Saints with Drew Brees had a historically bad defense, and a couple years they only won 7. But even those teams won 7 games. Getting the Colts over 7 wins, even at the inflated price, it will be in my opinion, a bargain. I think it will be up to 7.5 games within a week.
Wow, that's interesting. We'll definitely keep an eye out on that one. That's a longer term for the full season. Is there anything, with preseason kicking off tonight, is there anything that catches your eye for tonight?
Well, I went ahead and wagered on a bunch of preseason games. I would say one tried and true method, and it's a little bit difficult the day of the game because the numbers are sharper, but 2 of the games that I wagered on, and I do this pretty consistently, is I look to play the Hall of Fame game teams in the historical week 1 because they play what I call week 0. So they get into camp early, they get more reps, They get a game under their belt, so they're playing their second game against teams that are playing their first game. So not a surpriser that money has come in on the two Hall of Fame teams. I did bet game 253 Chicago at Cincinnati. I took 2.5 points, and I got in early on Baltimore hosting the Rams. I laid -1.5, and now the line is -3, going up to 3.5. But I would still look towards both those teams to win those games.
That's interesting, and like you said, looking for an edge. It makes a lot of sense. Teams that have a lot more experience. So going with preseason, we were talking about it a little before we came on, but how do you look at betting on preseason? Like right there, that makes a lot of sense looking at that edge. But and typically, especially this week, it's the fourth stringers, the third stringers, a lot of guys that might not even make the team that are fighting against each other. So it's not the typical week 1, week 2 starting lineup guys. How do you handicap that?
Well, you look for cluster injuries, and the Bengals actually have them in the secondary. They're really, really banged up, and that should compromise their defense late in the game against the Bears. So another reason to bet on the Bears. The only reason I didn't make a huge bet on the Bears is that last year they went to the jungle in December, early December, I believe, and the Bears won that game 33-7, a real quirky final score. So that's what kept it from being a really big bet for me. Is that this goes back to the art versus the math of it. I'm concerned the Bengals are still smarting from that loss, that regular season loss last year, but still that's just one mitigating factor against a whole bunch of reasons to bet on the Bears.
Oh, that makes sense. So if you don't mind, there's one or two questions here. Hey, Steve, I've been watching the Browns on Hard Knocks. What do you think for them this year?
Yeah, I'm bullish on the Browns. The Browns, if you break them down by category, their defense, just from a pure personnel perspective, is actually above average defense. The offense is arguably slightly below average, and their new quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, slightly below average. I think I've got him rated my 19th best quarterback. Now, Kaiser wasn't even a good backup quarterback, and he was their starter last year. They're -28, I believe, in turnover differential. The wise guys loved the Browns because the underlying stats were good, yards per play and such. However, they just gave away game after game, and you have to ask yourself, was that Kaiser or was that Hugh Jackson? 1-31 straight up now as a head coach. If you believe it was mostly Kaiser last year, you have to bet the Browns because from a pure analytics numbers perspective, this is an 8-8 or 7-9 win team that you can play over 5.5 season wins.
Wow, so that actually seems like they have some potential there, especially if they don't turn over the ball.
Which, if there's one thing that Tyrod Taylor excels at, is taking care of the ball. The real concern, the way you lose this bet, is that they go with the rookie quarterback Mayfield half the way through the year. Vegas and myself, we hate rookie quarterbacks. Very, very tough to bet on them.
Yeah, I'm sure. Big wild card. Somebody's coming in asking, will the Eagles repeat? Roster looks even more stacked than last year. What does Vegas think of the Eagles this year?
Vegas likes the Eagles. Vegas has them the number 3 ranked team in terms of season wins. Anywhere from 10 to 10.5 wins is the expectation. I'm higher on the Eagles. I have them as my number 1 team right now. The one thing that might get the Eagles in trouble is they've got the big bullseye on them now. So the division's going to come at them strong. The Giants are going to be so much better. The Cowboys are going to be better, and they have to play the AFC South and the NFC South. So they have a very difficult schedule, and that can certainly wear and tear on you especially when you're the Super Bowl team. And of course, we can't be sure Wentz is 100%. So those are the only mitigating factors. But the roster is loaded, and I love Coach Peterson. I love the analytics. He's got I think at least one Ivy League guy on his staff that is in his ear telling him when to go for it on 4th down. And by the way, that's what New England and Philly do right. A lot of these coaches are just clueless on. Your coach should never make the decisions when to go for 2, when to punt, when to kick field goals. He should have a guy. That's his job, the analytics guy, to tell the coach what he should do. And the coach can veto him every now and then. But these coaches that just go ahead and just guess, I can't stand it.
So I didn't realize that. You're telling me Belichick has somebody in his ear saying 4th and 4 in the third quarter, you're going for it or you're not. And obviously he has the overriding decision, but he has somebody whispering in his ear?
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. So, final question I have here. It's a selfish one here. So, I've been a Dolphin fan forever. Are they have any chance this year of taking out the Patriots and making any progress?
No and yes. Patriots have won the East 9 straight years. They're going to win again this year. However, progress, absolutely. You know, the Dolphins, this is a buy low trading type recommendation. If you looked at them over the past 5 years, they're like a 7.5 win team. They're a slightly below average team. Tannehill was making progress. 2 years ago, he was having one of his best years, and he blew out his knee. And ultimately, they had to come up with a quarterback, and they signed Jay Cutler, a guy that's always been perceived to be a bad locker room guy, a surly type of guy. I think when I think of Jay Cutler, I think of the game where he got sacked 9 times and he's running out of bounds and he nonchalantly throws it left-handed out of bounds, almost like saying, these guys just can't protect me. He is not a guy that makes his teammates better. No surprise, the Dolphins have bad stats last year and slumped to 6-10. With Tannehill back, as long as he stays upright, because their backup's horrible, they should certainly return to being an 8-8 team. I think the fish over 6.5 wins is one fine investment. Do we have time to talk about next week, week 2 in the NFL preseason?
Absolutely. I have plenty of time.
Absolutely. Let's talk about one of my favorite trends, and that's in week 2 of the preseason. I love taking teams that lose their first game, getting points against teams that won their first game. And this goes back to motivation. A lot of NFL coaches really don't care that much whether they win or lose any individual game, but no coach wants to go 0-4. And if you're 0-1, now you're 3 games away from being 0-4. And so if you lose your second game, well, you're staring at your dress rehearsal, game 3, where everyone plays their starters a half. That's probably the hardest game if you have to win it, if for a motivated team to actually win. So you don't want to have to be sweating in late August, the media saying, hey, the team's not ready to go. You want to get a win under your belt. Once you get one win, you can exhale, go ahead and evaluate your talent properly and not sweat it anymore, because no coach really minds going 1-3 in preseason. They just don't want to go 0-4. And because of all this, betting the 0-1 team straight up, as simplistic as this sounds, has been very profitable facing a 1-0 straight up preseason team.
That's those are the sort of edges you look for. It's great. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that. Well, thanks a lot. You've had a lot of great information. We'll definitely keep an eye on this stuff and the insight about how trading in sports markets, you can definitely see the overlap. I really appreciate the time. And like Steve said before, you can see all of his information on pregame.com. Steve, along with a lot of other very talented people, are on that site giving information every single day on all different sports.
Absolutely, and on Twitter, of course, at Fezzik Sports. There's a guy pretending to be me, but it's at Fezzik Sports is the real one.
Perfect. All right. Thanks a lot, Steve. Have a great rest of the day.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.